Well, hello, my name is Anthony Migchels, and I'm really thrilled to be interviewing Michael Tellinger from South Africa today in the next 90 minutes or so. A few introductory words about myself. I'm a monetary reformer from the Netherlands. I live in Arnhem, and I'm behind the blog currencies.wordpress.com, and where I discuss basically interest-free economics, both the problems that we have today with the financial system, with our current monetary system, why it works so well for the plutocracy and so badly for us, and then what kind of monetary reform programs have there been devised over the last 150 years or so, and would they be sufficient to solve the problems that we have now, and to just basically to get the conversation on a higher level. But my main job is circulating an alternative currency here in Holland, the Gelre, which I think is at this point probably the most modern alternative currency out there in the world, and I think we'll spend a few words on that in this interview also. And well, without further ado, here's Michael Tellinger from South Africa. Michael, welcome.
Thanks, Anthony. Lovely meeting you. I've heard a lot about you and your work, and I'm really impressed, and I'd like to also ask you a little bit about your knowledge and input as to what we could possibly benefit from in South Africa in our speedy transition, if I have anything to do with it. And my background, for people that don't know me, is I'm a researcher and an author from South Africa. I have a degree in pharmaceutics from Wits University in Johannesburg, for those that are impressed by that kind of stuff. I stumbled upon an interesting discovery that has really captured the imagination of alternative thinkers and those that are really at the leading edge of science, and that's linking the ancient stone circles of South Africa, the vanished civilizations of Southern Africa, to the Sumerian and the Egyptian and the Mayan and the Aztec and all the other ancient civilizations of the world, and also really connecting the dots between the ancient civilizations and what's happening in the world today. And that really is, I believe, the most exciting connection and subject of discussion at the moment. Also, I've found that the ancient civilizations, these vanished civilizations in South Africa, had an advanced technology, and way more advanced than what we use today, that is connected to Caesar technology and hypersound, and they used sound as a source of energy for pretty much everything they did. And we're only starting to understand now what it is that they were up to, or get an idea, or think we have an idea what they were up to.
Okay, so just for our information here, Michael, we'll move on to finance and Ubuntu a little later, but this is where you started out, I think, with the stone circles. This is what brought you into all this. Can you explain how that went, or?
Yeah, sure. It's my obsession, or interest, should I say, with the origins of humankind and ancient civilizations and ancient human history. Who are we? Where do we come from? Why are we here as a species? And I often say that the fact that we don't have instant answers for those three very simple questions clearly points out to the fact that we're a species with amnesia. If we don't know who we are, where we come from, and why we're here, and if we deny the folklore and the stories that have been told by ancient cultures for thousands of years, we sort of tell our children that those are just stories, they can't be true. That makes us a species with amnesia. And that started me down a path of research and discovery into origins of humankind, and reading the ancient texts and studying various religious groups and religious belief systems, and realizing that it all points to a specific point in time when humanity was suddenly created and emerged as a new species that didn't exist before. And this is all highly consistent with pretty much every ancient civilization, the knowledge that they had, and the shamanic information and shamanic knowledge that gets transferred down through the ages. And it was that in 2005, while I was writing Slave Species of God, which was my first book about the subject, that I suddenly became aware through the research that I had to do, suddenly became aware that there was a period, much longer period in human history, where money did not exist at all. Any kind of money, no form of money whatsoever. Even in the philosophy or the concept of money did not exist. And it's only in the last few thousand years that the concept of money suddenly emerged. And I realized that, hold on, there's something wrong with this equation. And I realized that there was a time in human history that money was introduced as a tool of enslavement to the human population by the priest kings, or the gods, if you can want to call them that, to the human race. And it was done for one very specific reason, for absolute control. And it was at that time, in 2005, that I started looking at a concept of a world without money, and what would happen if you remove money from society. Because
But before you go there, what gave you this clue that this was introduced into human society as a control mechanism? What made you see it?
well, it was really came from the Sumerian texts and the translations of the Sumerian tablets.
It's in the Sumerian tablets.
Oh yeah, very much so.
Oh.
Because there was a time where there were no kingdoms on earth, and there were no kings that ruled the earth. People were just completely and utterly enslaved, without any kind of hierarchy among the people themselves. The only hierarchy they seem to have been is between the people and the gods.
Yeah.
These are the beings, call them ETs, call them whatever you want. And this is where you have to become comfortable with coming to terms with the fact of extraterrestrial activity on planet Earth.
Yeah.
Because if you're not comfortable with that, all of this stuff is not going to make any sense.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. And this is where a lot of people go through mainstream education and upbringing and religious upbringing just go, whoa, I can't go there. That's the problem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when did, you were also saying humanity suddenly arose. When did this happen?
Well, I'm talking about humanity in the species that we call the human race. That doesn't mean to say that there weren't other beings on planet Earth at other times, millions of years ago, and possibly even billions of years ago. But again, this is an area that many people are not prepared to go.
Yeah.
So at the moment, all indications point to the fact that humanity arose sometime around 300,000 years ago. The genetic strand, or the genetic code that is in our DNA, that points to somewhere around 300,000 years. Whether it's 400,000 years or 200,000 years, but most people sort of refer to the 300,000 year mark.
And was humanity always ruled by these god kings in this era?
That's without a doubt, that's the situation.
Yeah. Okay.
And again, there's some interesting Sumerian texts that refer to this event, and they're known as the King's Lists. The Sumerian texts that are known as the King's List that actually tell you in very specific terms is of the time when the gods appointed the kings on earth from among the people that they controlled. And they gave those kings, turned them into the first priest kings, and these first priest kings were given special knowledge, special privileges. They were given knowledge of science and alchemy, and probably given some fierce weapons with which to control the rest of humanity, and given information that they then kept secret and occult and hidden from the rest of the people, with which and this information they then used to oppress and control the people. And this is where you start seeing the rise of secret societies, all the occult behavior, secret rituals and all that. And the Sumerian tablets tell us very clearly that there was a very specific time in human history that this event took place. And is there
also a date?
Well, that's where it becomes interesting. The only reference to date that we have that we could use in some sort of way is that same King's List, although two of these same King's Lists that I refer to actually talk about the flood. And this is where you can start saying, okay, is this the biblical flood we're talking about? Which flood is it? Because it clearly says, and then the flood swept over. After these priest kings ruled the world and these other gods ruled the world for more than 220,000 years.
Then came the flood.
Then came the flood. So
And this flood is also a global phenomenon. All
exactly.
these civilizations have these myths.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Every ancient culture talks about the flood. So we know that there have been great upheavals in human history that we have no idea about. The fact that the Earth's north-south pole has shifted, and I'm not talking about magnetic north, I'm talking about true north. The fact that that has shifted, it is not where it is today, not where it was in past times. That's a spectacular thought. We can't wrap our heads around that, right? So,
Yeah, because what could have tilted the Earth? That's the question. Then.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not about the tilt of the Earth. It's not about the fact that the Earth is tilted at 23.5 degrees or whatever it is today. What I'm talking about is the axis, the north-south axis, is not where it was in the past. They are, and I'm saying this because Adam's calendar was constructed on where the north-south axis is not lying where the north-south axis is today, and this has got nothing to do with the angle of the Earth.
Okay.
So we're dealing with huge geophysical forces that either pulled the crust or shifted the crust of the Earth, but something that was so powerful that it made the north-south, the axis mundi, as it's called by the shamans. The axis mundi has moved.
Yeah. Okay. When you hear about the flood nowadays, at least what I hear a lot is that it is associated with the end of the glacial area.
Yeah.
What's your position
Well,
on that?
the fact that you use the word glacial is interesting because a lot of the work that I do was inspired by Zecharia Sitchin and his translations. The more I get into it, the more I realize that many of his interpretations were not necessarily accurate, and we're finding new evidence for that. But it pushed us in the right direction.
He was the pioneer.
Exactly. And if he had known what we know now, he would have changed his mind. Because it sounds to me like he was an open-minded kind of guy, and he went with what information he got. And interpretations can only be based on the amount of knowledge that you have.
Of course, yes. Yeah.
So he gave us his interpretations based on the knowledge he had. If he had the knowledge that I now contribute to this pool of information, he would have probably brought a lot of other information that he had that we are not even aware of, and been able to put a much more cohesive storyline for us. So it's a pity that he never got to see some of this, these discoveries that I've put together in Southern Africa. But he translates some of the information in the Sumerian text as that they talk about the flood, the so-called when the flood swept over, came as a result of a giant celestial body moving very close to Earth, coming from the southern ecliptic from the South Pole towards the Sun, and it was so close to the Earth that it actually pulled the giant ice sheets on Antarctica into the oceans, causing these giant tidal waves that were kilometers high, not just hundreds of meters, but kilometers high tidal waves that would have gone right around the planet. And that explains why everything is so destroyed.
Well, this rings a bell because there's also the notion that even a few thousand years ago, nobody knows exactly how long ago, but that kind of time span, the firmament might have looked very different. I mean, that in the old ages they equated planets with the gods.
Yes.
This seems strange because nowadays if you look at the firmament you see very tiny dots, and you need to be a very good observer to even see that they move.
Yes.
But there are many reasons to suggest that even a few thousand years ago Venus, Mars, etc. would have been huge objects in the sky, meaning we would have been much closer to them,
yes,
or they to us, and
yes,
that the movements, the slow movements of the bodies in the firmament, etc., and that this would have created this idea of gods, and would have been very impressive, obviously, for people.
Yeah.
So this is consistent with your idea of a planet.
Yeah, look,
as you just described.
It's not only that. I mean, if you speak to astronomers and astrophysicists that are really studying our solar system, they've been talking about, that there are more than 30 planets in our solar system. but we don't know about the other planets. They detect them, from various measurements that they believe the other planets because of strange behavior of other celestial bodies. But these other planets are not all necessarily moving in the same plane that the 9 planets or whatever they are today, described as planets. They're not in the same plane. That they're actually moving at slightly different angles to the plane of orbit of the other planets and so forth. So just like comets. Comets are a great example. That there can be huge comets in our solar system and they disappear. Yep. They come back every few thousand years or a few hundred years or a few years and then cause havoc in our solar system and then they disappear.
Indeed. Yeah.
So if there's a giant planet out there that does that every few thousand years, that could cause huge havoc.
Yeah, that would be Planet X then, Nemesis, or
Yeah.
how do you call it, Nibiru?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's an amazing, and this only came to my attention a few weeks ago, and a Chilean astrophysicist, astronomer. He died in the late 90s. I forget his name now, but what an amazing guy! And because he speaks a different language, he's not known in the English world at all, or outside the Spanish world, right? So this guy has been around, and he made predictions about Halley's Comet, about all the major comets.
I think I saw it, yeah.
Yeah, and he, before he died, he was very, very concerned about a giant planet that he talks about that is on its way to our solar system from deep space. And he calls it Hercobulus. And he says this giant planet that he refers to as Hercobulus is going to cause havoc in our solar system. In fact, he went as far, before he died, he went as far as saying that it will destroy our civilization completely. So here we got giant circular times, epoch, cycles, and history repeats itself. And we're possibly heading for a great extinction. And what are we going to leave behind? A few computer chips and a lot of arrogance and bank vaults full of gold, filled of fake gold and piles of money. That when future civilizations discover it, they're going to say, what the hell was going on here?
Yeah, we don't seem to have much to show for us for the time being. Well, it's maybe a bit too negative, but
I want to just quickly come back to those same Sumerian tablets that referred to these priest kings, and when kingdom was lowered to earth from heaven, describing the time when the first priest kings were appointed from amongst humanity. This is a huge moment in modern human history as we know it today, because that's when we can start connecting the so-called popular civilizations, the Egyptians, the Sumerians, and so forth, to that period in human history. But it's also at that same time that we find Sumerian clay tablets that are the oldest forms of money, that go back more than 4,000 years. And I show this in my new book, in the Ubuntu contributionism book, where I actually show you that this is actually the earliest form of money, clay tablets, issued by these first priest kings,
fascinating,
who were the first bankers, and their banks were the temples. And from the temples, these bankers were issuing these promissory notes and bills of exchange in clay tablets. The same way our bankers, our royal bloodline bankers that are connected to those ancient royal bloodlines, same royal bloodlines still run the global financial systems today.
Yeah.
And the way they were issuing promissory notes, bills of exchange, and negotiable instruments, they're still doing it the same way today, except today we do it on...
these basic instruments already in these clay tablets. Unbelievable.
Except today we do it on paper. They used to do it in clay.
Yeah.
Nothing has changed.
Yeah. But this narrative is not even so different from, for instance, Moses receiving tablets with instructions, etc.
Yes.
And a little later the people worshipping the golden calf. Mm-hmm. It is more or less in the same direction.
Yes.
Maybe a little bit more about the stone circles. Just tell us what you have discovered about these things.
Very important. It's really critical information. That there can be no more doubt that these stone circles they're not living quarters or dwellings or anything like that. The most obvious reason is that they have no doors and entrances. Okay, so that automatically rules out a place of dwelling or habitation or anything like that. So there had to be something else. And what these were and still are energy generating devices using sound and frequency that comes out of planet Earth and converting that sound, that vibrational resonance, into very high electromagnetic activity, and that still exists. So we've measured it, we know it's there. So in essence, we're looking at free energy generating devices, and there are more than 10 million of them throughout southern Africa.
Yeah, I've seen a presentation by you, and it's all over the place. It's so pervasive all over the country. Not even just South Africa, but southern Africa.
Yeah.
Where does it stop? Where is the border? Of
well, look, I was
territory?
introduced to these by Johann Haren in 2000, early 2007. And that's when I started looking at it, because I knew instantly it was connected to my work in Slave Species of God. And I was absolutely right. Then I took the research to different areas. But Johann told me that when he first started photographing these stone circles, because the first photographs I ever saw were the aerial shots that Johann Haren took, and then shared those with me. And I realized that he told me that these stone circles actually go beyond the Zambezi River into Zambia and even possibly Malawi and so forth. So we're dealing with South Africa, Swaziland, Lesotho, Botswana, Zimbabwe, huge in Zimbabwe, and Mozambique. It's all over southern Africa.
Yeah. Huge area. And of course the place where humanity started, officially speaking anyway.
Well, what is... You've got to start smiling at the coincidences, right?
Yeah.
Shamanic knowledge and shamanic African information that's been kept for thousands of years by African shaman talks about Adam's calendar, which was also found by Johann Haren, incidentally, in 2003. So he played a very important role in getting this information out there. Creator Mutwa made it very clear to me that Adam's calendar was known to the ancients as Inzalo Yelanga, or known in Zulu as birthplace of the sun. And what happened at this place, the birthplace of the sun, that's where, according to the African shaman, humanity was created by the gods. And then when you ask him, well, which god was it? It's very simple. That god is known as Enkai, or Enki in Sumerian. Same individual that's responsible for the gold mining associated with these stone circles, with Great Zimbabwe, and this whole obsession that humanity inherited to do with gold. Because some people think that, because of the history books they read, all absolutely filled with rubbish and nonsense about where gold comes from and why humans are obsessed with gold. It's all just speculations. It's all untrue until you get to this point where you make the connections. Humans got their obsession for gold from the gods. Even the Bible tells us that.
Really? Where?
Yes, because in Genesis 2, it is not Adam or human beings that talk about gold. The first mention in the Bible you get about gold comes from God. Or the correct expression, actually, the Elohim, which is the plural, the gods.
Yeah.
And we all know that the gods in the Bible, or many of us believe, that the Elohim and the Anunnaki are actually the same group of beings. In fact, people that do a lot of work on Anunnaki have openly stated that the Anunnaki used to call themselves the Elohim.
Okay.
And that's
so there's a very direct link.
Very direct link.
Yeah, because in maybe for the people there, later all these different words for God or gods was made the Lord or
yes. So the word Elohim in the Bible, the Hebrew origin of the word, is a plural for the gods.
Yeah.
It's never a singular.
Exactly.
And then it just became, from the plural, it became God.
Yeah.
And that's it. And that it's like, it is such a deception. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
People read the Bible all their life. They study it and they have no idea what they're reading.
Yeah. True. Fair enough. Yes. Okay. And you see you see them as energy devices. These stone circles, and you also added they basically still are.
Oh yeah. If all we need to do is figure out how to convert this electromagnetic activity into energy, the usable energy.
Yeah.
I know there are people that know how to do that.
But if you can measure it, you can transform it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. and we measure it in very, very high levels, and specifically the sound frequencies that are coming out of the stones. You know, it's unimaginable that you can find sound frequencies or the potential for sound in the gigahertz coming out of the stones, resonating
Fascinating.
at frequencies that convert to sound in the gigahertz. It's insane. You don't measure that anywhere in nature.
Yeah.
And then you obviously the other stone structures that we need to pay attention to, and I think in there lies a lot of information that we need to look at and our scientists need to look at, and those are the stone circles that resemble modern day magnetrons, and magnetrons are little devices that are in laser beams, and microwaves have magnetrons to create the high frequency microwaves and so forth. And magnetrons create incredible amount of energy and used in lasers that can cut metal in the split second. And here we're sitting in South Africa with magnetrons that are 20 meters in diameter, made out of virtually pure silica. And then you start realizing that we're actually dealing with silicon-based technology in ancient times.
Yeah. Going back 10 millions of years.
Going back possibly millions of years. In fact, I must tell you that my most recent thoughts on this huge, what seems to be a huge energy grid in southern Africa, it was creating incredible amounts of energy we can't even imagine today. Goes back beyond the creation of humanity, and it's not just connected to the gold mining and the obsession with gold. I think it has a lot more profound effect about terraforming and going into areas that some people find a bit too far-fetched. It sounds like science fiction to them, but that's exactly what we're dealing with there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's fascinating stuff, but I'm just going to move on because of time, not because I think we can talk for hours about this, but because I want to link back to what you were saying earlier, this fascination humanity has for gold, and I mean it is there. I mean, if you have some gold in your hand, this shiny yellow stuff, and the intensity with which it seems to shine, it touches you. I mean, I'm absolutely not a materialistic man. I own nothing, and I want to keep it that way, but I do sense it. And so you say this is inbred, or there is something.
It comes from the gods or the Elohim, because as I said in Genesis 2, when Adam was alone on earth, Eve was not even made from his rib. It's already then that God comes to him and tells him about gold, about the land of Havilah, where the land is good, the water is good, and by the way, there is gold.
Yeah.
So humans got their obsession for gold from the Elohim or the Anunnaki because they were mining the gold, and they created the humans as their slaves to mine the gold. And there is where all the trouble started. Right? So the obsession with human gold comes from the fact that the gold never belonged to the humans. It always belonged to the gods. And the evidence of this can be found in the references from the conquistadors when they first arrived in the Americas, and the Portuguese in Africa and Asia, where you get references when they found these native populations, and they all had huge amounts of gold. And this was fascinating to the Spaniards. Where did you get all this gold from? It's insane, man. We don't have that much gold in Europe, you know, where culture and civilization is controlled from. And when they asked them, where did you get all this gold from? They always got the same answer. The gold belongs to the gods. The gold belongs to the gods. Yeah. And that's very important to remind ourselves of that. So when those first human slaves were either granted a little bit of gold by the gods or the overlords or the landlords or whatever you want to call them, or the priest kings, where they gave somebody a little bit of gold because they were a good slave, they cherished that gold because they had something that they weren't supposed to have. And that's where the obsession and the value of gold among humans comes from, because it's something that humans were not supposed to have. That's the true origin of gold.
Interesting.
And remember that money was never gold. Money, when money first appeared,
yes,
it was never gold. It was always silver. And we must
Yeah.
remember this, because the gods weren't interested in silver.
Yeah.
They were after the gold. So they used, in the process of mining, they also mined the silver, because they were obviously using that for all kinds of other stuff as well. And we all know, born with a silver spoon in your mouth, privileged upbringing, right? And colloidal silver, and that heals, and cures, and colloidal gold is even more effective. But when first money, the printed coins were not gold, they were silver. Every now and then, they would issue a few gold coins that then had ridiculous value, and those became the true collector's items with special values. But it was always silver, because the gold belonged to the gods.
Yeah. Okay. So okay. You say it was a silver. One can also make a case that real ancient money, also by the priest kings, by the way, was simply bookkeeping already at that stage,
Yes.
but that they were using silver as a unit of account. So,
Yes.
So not actually exchanging the silver itself, but
Yes.
using it to express value.
Yeah.
So, but never gold, indeed.
No.
Very true. So.
So when you see movies and they say, "Oh, here's some gold coins for you," that's not accurate.
Yeah.
For anyone to have given you gold coins in the past, that would have been serious remuneration.
Well, let's face it, even throughout modern history, gold always has been the scarce form of money, and the rich man's money, and the common man's money always was silver, or even local copper, kind
exactly.
of whatever was available. But gold as money is really for the genteel kind of, the genteel part of the population. So, but you were just saying, even in these old Sumerian clay tablets, they were talking promissory notes, these other financial instruments. So
it's fantastic.
Yeah. So
when you see that connection, you got to smile.
Yeah.
Especially if you've, like you've been exposed to the legal system that upholds this completely fabricated financial industry that we all caught up in. And when you're involved in it at a Supreme Court level, and you see how the laws are all structured to uphold this false abuse of humanity, it puts a smile on your face, because now we can see the connection, and it's really very easy to see through the lies and deceptions.
yeah, and it's just mind-boggling to see how this basic strand of money goes throughout human history. Yeah, and if you see how obsessive everybody is trying to, and this intense sense of scarcity that people experience because there's never enough money, etc. And it's really mind-blowing. And a book that particularly impressed me is The Babylonian Woe by David Essel. Maybe you've heard of it.
I haven't read it, no.
Well, it's a fantastic book, and he tracks back the history of money all the way back to Babylon, and he's one of the inspirations why I talk about the money power, talking about the conspiracy, because you can give it many names, of course, but the monetary part of it is so fundamental, and they really do rule us through money.
Totally.
Yeah.
And you know who put it really nicely is, whatever you think of the Zeitgeist movement and what they do, I think there were a few inaccuracies in some of the documentaries, but putting that aside, I think they woke a lot of people up, and they're contributing a huge amount of information towards enlightenment and the awakening of humanity, and secret government projects and false flag events, and how brutal governments can be against their own people and all that stuff. But the one thing that they put very nicely is that how you enslave people physically is completely mirrored in enslaving them through money. Because what you do is you tell people, originally people are completely, they're slaves, whips and chains, and that's all they are, they're property. And then you tell people, okay, we're going to set you free. The landlord says, we're going to set you free. You can now live where you want. You don't have to, you're no longer my slave. You can go and live wherever you want. There's some land for you. We're going to give you a title deed to the land. So you have an entitlement to the land. It doesn't really belong to you, but it will make you think it belongs to you, because it still belongs to the landlord in the end, because you still pay taxes on the land, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So we make you think that you're free by giving you a piece of land, make you think it's your land, and then we're going to charge you taxes on it. And the taxes you have to pay with money. And to get that money, you have to work for me and earn the money. So
Exactly.
but when you enslave people physically, you have to provide housing and shelter, you have to provide clothing, and you have to provide food. Then you tell people, oh, we're going to set you free, and now you can go. You must go provide your own housing, your own clothing, and your own food. But to get that, you need money. So you need to go back to the landlord and work for the landlord as a slave to earn the money.
In the cotton mill that is making the clothes for which you will have to pay.
So can you see how
Oh, yes.
spectacular the lie and the deception of money is?
Yes.
It
yes.
is the ultimate tool
Well,
of enslavement.
Well, I hear you 100%. And let there be no mistake there. But it's not then just the money. It's also just claiming ownership to land, for instance, and give you
Yes.
this entitlement or whatever. But,
Exactly.
at some point, some dudes say, "Okay, this is all our land," and everybody that is born after them, they're telling them, "Well, that's ours, but you can hire it from us or rent it
Yes.
from us, and of course you will have to pay
Yes.
with, say, 40-50% of your working day, because that's what you're actually talking about when you talk money." It's not the note that you receive; it's the hours of work that you put in that is represented, of course, by this money,
Exactly.
and these are the chains that.
Slavery and servitude.
But is it then the money or what we buy with money?
You know, I think we need to just go back a few steps. You said a few things that are important here. It's like the people in the beginning all laid claim to this land. Well, those people are these first priest kings that I mentioned
Yes.
in the Sumerian texts.
Most definitely.
And the only way they could lay claim to the land is because they had weapons of mass destruction in ancient times.
Yeah.
And they had fierce weapons with which they could subdue the masses. I mean, how could you, as one individual, tell all the other people, this is now my land, and you're going to have to pay me money, and if you don't do as I say, I'm going to punish you. If you have no tools or weapons with which to punish the people on your own, the people are going to look at you and say, screw you.
Mhm.
You know, we're going to carry on living on our land, you can carry on living over there, leave us alone. Only when you can come there and you can hurt them in some way or some technology that you have that first of all frightens them and makes them obey you, that's how you lay claim to the land. Otherwise, it's not going to happen.
Mhm.
You know,
Well, I hear you, and I agree. But beside the power, you also need a myth. You need a story.
Yes.
You need to have. Convince people that you are from another level, making it worthwhile, etc. Otherwise, there's no sense.
and how you convince them that you come from another level is by showing them magic tricks.
Yeah.
Look,
Yeah.
I can create a laser beam into the sky.
Yes.
Or I can chop down the tree with
Yeah.
my fiery sword
Yeah.
that reaches a kilometer away.
Yeah.
And all this kind of, yes, this is
Airplanes.
ancient technology. And, you know, and I can fly away into the sky with my fancy flying carpet.
Mhm.
And you start seeing myths and legends come out of these ancient stories that were based on real activities. And that's how people got scared. And they were frightened of these priest kings because they were seen as people with absolute power and control. And that's why they obeyed them. Otherwise, there's no way. You know?
Yeah.
I often in my presentations make the statement, well, you live in a community and everybody is equal or whatever, and you're getting on with your lives, and tomorrow morning I get up and I get up at our community town meeting. I say, listen, everybody, it's been fantastic living in this community. I love you all dearly, but I've decided that as of tomorrow, I'm going to be the king. And all this land now belongs to me, and you're going to have to work for me and pay me taxes to live on this land because I've laid claim to this land. What are those people going to say to you? They're going to say, screw you.
Yeah. Obviously.
And when they say screw you, you're going to either say, okay, well, that was just an idea, or you're going to say,
Well, I'm going to mess you up.
you're going to say, well, here's a thing that I'm going to convince you with to do as I say. And that's where the playing field shifts.
Well, another thing that might have impressed the people is that there are clear indications that these gods were also much bigger than we were.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Oh, look,
the
and
Nephilim
that's
story. Or
and then the whole thing of giants and the Nephilim in the Bible.
Yeah.
I mean, remember that in the Bible, it's not just the Nephilim. It's the Anakim. it's the Nephilim, it's the Rephaim, it's the Zamzumim, it's the bigger Gibberim, it's the Emim. It's all these weird beings that were giants. They refer to as titanic races of beings that we know nothing about.
Yeah.
The only ones we know a little bit about are the Nephilim, who were giants, and they came and they took the daughters of man and had children with them.
Yeah, bastards.
What?
Yeah. Okay. I really want to move on now to today, because this is laying the groundwork actually for obviously what are we going to do about it, because that's what really matters, of course.
Yes.
And you in South Africa, you do many things. One of your key activities, I think, is litigation against banking and perhaps government in South Africa.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about?
Our litigation or my personal legal action against the banks started in 2010, and I knew absolutely nothing. I just heard at that stage. I started about 2 years prior to that. I started hearing this philosophy of sovereign man and sovereignty, and that you're born free on the land, and then you, from the moment you take your first breath, you're enslaved, just like you said. Those before us laid claim to the land. And now everybody is born, and from the first breath we take to the last breath we breathe out, we are enslaved to those who make the rules and the laws.
You're 100,000 in debt by the time you get born. So.
Now, when you are born, and that applies to every single living, breathing human being, when you are born, you come into this world, you didn't agree to anything. You didn't sign any contracts.
Nothing.
You didn't agree to work or to pay taxes or none of this stuff, and yet you're forced to do that all your life. Clearly there's something wrong with that equation.
Mm-hmm.
And for some people that are still struggling with this, they need to look deep inside their hearts and minds and think about this and realize how enslaved and manipulated they have been to believe that the lives they lead are normal.
Yeah.
They are as abnormal as you could possibly get. So my litigation started when I realized this thing called sovereignty. And my friend Scott Kundal, actually, who then went on to litigate with me and started the New Economics Rights Alliance, who is now involved with the Ubuntu Party with me in South Africa, we started, he actually just said to me, just send the bank a note saying, asking them for the original contract. And I thought, that's a good idea, I'll just do that. Little did I know what I was letting myself into. But it was a fantastic time in my life. Because
and this was 2010?
2010.
Yeah.
It was really a fantastic time because it forced me to go and find out for myself. And based on the response I got from the bank, with the first email that I got back, I knew that something was wrong here.
Oh, what happened?
Well, they just said, they're not obliged to send me any documentation. I went, what? And then I asked them for a bill. I sent them an email saying I want to settle the whole amount for my home loan. Please, can you send me a bill for the outstanding amount? They said, no, we can't send you a bill. It's because it's a complicated calculation, and you must first come into the branch of the bank and give us an undertaking that you want to settle this. And I said, no. First, send me a bill, what I owe you for this house, so I know what I'm in for, and then I'll make up a check and I'll come and settle it. No, they refused to show me the original documents, the original contract. They refused to give me a settlement amount. And this carried on, and this obviously, being a proud individual, I started. I immediately knew this is a huge scam, and there's a lot more to it than first meets the eye. And that was my introduction to informing myself, learning about the Bills of Exchange Act in South Africa that we get from the British Bills of Exchange Act of 1882, I think. It's just obviously it's exactly the same original document, and I think in Holland you got something very similar, and they just skew it for the needs that they have in Southern Africa. And I started looking at the differences between money, what is really money, that piece of paper in your hand, it's just a bill. Remember, it's called a 100 Rand bill. It's a bill.
Yeah.
It's a promise to pay. And I started learning and realizing, and I went to court the first time in the Supreme Court in Johannesburg. I mean, we knew nothing. We just knew that we heard that the banks use your signature to create bills of exchange and negotiable instruments that they then trade on the international stock markets. And I started realizing that every time you go into the bank and sign something that's got a number or a value attached to it, it becomes a negotiable instrument.
Yes, okay.
And all these things are traded without us knowing it. So the banks are constantly profiteering from us as living, breathing human beings by putting our signatures on pieces of paper, creating negotiable instruments that the bank that then works with.
Yeah, yeah,
And so my first appearance in court was just basically saying to the judge that I'm under the impression from my research that the bank profiteered from my signature, that they're no longer the owners of the contract, that they sold it on and made lots of money on it, and that they have no right to act against me because they no longer own the original contract,
yeah.
and that they even profiteered from my offer to purchase the original promissory note, and I asked to see that original promissory note, and that was never presented in court. Neither was the original contract. And throughout the 3 years in court, which only ended on the 12th of February 2014, it came to an end. Starting in, so it started in late 2010, and it ended in on the 12th of February 2014.
And this is the end of your litigation? Or?
This is the end now,
Okay.
because they now hit me with a bill, a bill of taxation for the costs of the bank's lawyers, which in total amounted to close to R500,000 over 3 years. Where just because I had the cheek to defend myself against the banks, faced crooked judges with pre-written judgments. The original contract was never presented. I asked for it many times. It was never presented. It was just ignored. The bank's lawyers and advocates.
Yeah, that's so stunning, because I just want to make note here, because you know, every time you go to a judge, mostly the institutions will say, well, contract is contract. But they're not even showing the contract.
That's
in
right.
this case, so
well, show the contract.
Yeah.
And there was an interesting moment in the very first time I was in court, but I was so green, I didn't pick up on it. You see, if I had to go back in there now, this would not happen again. And this is why I believe that they have accepted my promissory notes. As you know, I've paid the bank with close to R500,000 with 3 separate promissory notes. My promissory notes that I made and delivered to the lawyers of the bank, and they've been accepted. No word. The first promissory note I gave them on the 11th of June 2013. So it's many months have gone by. And the last one I gave them the same day on the 12th of February 2014 for 280,000 rand. That's why they accepted those, and they don't want to go back into court, because you know I'm a lot wiser now than I was then. We're running in the elections. The Ubuntu party is getting a lot of media exposure. This is not a good time to bring this to the media's attention and bring it back to court, because they will get really bad press.
Yeah, and it's, I think what I noticed, because what you are doing in South Africa is clearly a part of a global trend, that people are taking the banks to court and it's really fascinating to see, because everybody has got his own perspective and way of going about it. So I try to keep track of all the strategies out there. And
I just want to quickly tell you, because I got sidetracked there. The first time we were in court, prior to me going to court, I drew up what we call an acceptance for value, right? You know, there's acceptance for value. I created a bill of exchange out of their bill to me, according to the bills of exchange, and I delivered it to them in full and final settlement, and I had proof of delivery. So as far as I was concerned, I had settled the outstanding amount. They acknowledged receiving the bill of exchange in court, but then they completely ignored it and fobbed it off. They didn't even present the bill. They were reading the accompanying letter, trying to confuse the judge and the people that this was the bill of exchange. And I said, no, hold on. They're confusing the issue. That's the accompanying letter. The bill of exchange is gone. They've got my bill of exchange. They've kept it. And I want it back, because it's close to R1,000,000. And either they're going to credit my account for the amount on the bill of exchange, or I want my bill back. It's my bill. The judge at that stage turned at the lawyers and said, where's the bill? And they said, well, we don't have it here. And then the judge looked at me and he said, well, if the bill isn't here, we can't talk about it. Now that was an open door for me to say, thank you very much. If the original contract isn't here, we can't talk about it.
Yeah, well, it seems so clear, actually.
But I was too green. I didn't know enough, you know.
But even green or not, but as you have been saying, I mean, it's so blatant. They will force you to show the bill,
Absolutely.
but they will not show the bank to show the contract.
No.
And even if you point it out to them,
Yes. Well, I did. I said, well, where's the contract? And then they said, well, the contract is in our office. You can come and inspect it there.
yeah.
But I didn't know that it had to be present at that stage.
Yeah.
All I had to do is to say, well, it's not supposed to be in your office, it's supposed to be here.
Yeah.
So on that note, I request that the court dismisses this case.
Yeah.
The contract is not here. They claim it's in their office. It should be here. There can be no hearing.
Yeah.
And that the judge would have been forced to close it, because then that's obviously blatant that they're manipulating the situation.
Well, forced. I mean, you were explaining earlier that
Yeah.
at the end of the case, the judge, all of this, immediately after the hearing ended, immediately started reading a prepared statement.
Yes.
So,
However, I must tell you this, that because of all this action, I know for a fact that many people have benefited from the information we've shared.
absolutely.
Thousands and thousands
Yeah.
of people have benefited.
Yeah.
And I know from at least 2 people that went into court and used my argument saying, where's the contract?
Yeah.
And immediately, the moment they said, without the wet ink contract, not a certified
Exactly,
copy,
that's
the
very important.
original wet ink contract, and some people present a certified copy and they think it's fine, and it's not fine. It's not acceptable. It has to be the original wet ink contract. And they've asked for the, immediately as the proceedings begin, and in 2 instances that I know of, and there's probably many more, the judge requested the bank, where is the contract? And at that moment, the bank withdrew.
Well, it's what in the United States, because I was going to link this to the international scene here, because people are taking the banks to court all over the place, and in the United States you have the MERS issue, MERS. What happened in the years before the housing bubble popped in 2008 is that all these banks created these derivatives, these mortgage-backed securities, and traded them. The securitization of all these loans that go on into the financial sector. There's all these derivatives, and what they do is they take 10 mortgages and they cut them into pieces and put these pieces of the mortgage into the derivative. But then the direct link between the bank and you as the borrower, if that is a good word, is broken.
It's broken.
Because the derivative is not the original contract. And
No.
in the United States, the problem is that the ongoing link of entitlement between the bank and between you as borrower and ultimately the financial institution that at that point happens to own your mortgage, or at least part of it, this link between you and this owner can no longer be established. And in the United States, you have all sorts of people that have won cases on this notion.
Yes.
So this is one thing that is going on. And then you were also saying that the banks at this point and the government, they try to avoid getting into court because of all the hassle that it creates, and because obviously their story stinks on many different levels, and they know this. And it's becoming more troublesome all the time. And in Ireland, for instance, you have more than 1,000 people now in court with what they call debt options, by a very energetic woman there who organizes this. And what she does is she just tells the people what to do to get in court, which in Ireland is very easy because you don't need a lawyer to start litigation there, which is a major handicap in many other countries. And lawyers are expensive and they play by the book, which is the last thing you want to do. But in Ireland, you can create your own case, and the point is that she has 1,000 people in court now, and that's a lot for Ireland, a very small country.
Exactly.
And the banks are not reacting,
Oh, wow.
and the people are not paying for
Wow.
the time that they are awaiting the reply of the bank, and some
Yes.
of them have been waiting for years now,
Oh,
and
okay.
the banks are not coming to court because they
I
don't
think,
know what to say.
yeah, I think it's we're getting to the stage of critical mass now.
Absolutely.
I think
yeah.
it's becoming obvious, and yeah. Look, our situation in South Africa is now being highlighted by the coming elections, because the Ubuntu party has become a reality in 2010, became a registered party, and is now contesting in the elections on the 7th of May.
And
And-
can you tell us a little bit about your prognosis? What kind of perspective do you see for the party?
Well, I believe we're going to get at least one seat. We need 45,000 votes for one seat in Parliament. That's all it takes to inject the virus
Yeah.
into the system.
Yeah.
The virus of consciousness.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about negative stuff here. I'm talking about
Mhm.
positive energy.
Oh, yeah, of
Okay,
course.
just for
Yeah.
those that might
Yeah.
get the wrong impression here.
Mhm.
So we went into, or I created the political party out of the Ubuntu Liberation Movement as a political platform to be able to make certain statements that would normally get me into jail.
Yeah.
So now, as a political party, I can make statements that are my promise to the people. And my promise to the people is we'll close down the Reserve Bank, we'll replace it with a People's Bank that issues money for the people, by people, tax-free and interest-free, with a minute little bit of handling fee,
Exactly. That's the way forward.
and stimulate all the industry. I'm not talking about banking. I'm not talking about mining industry, because that's destroying our country. But I'm talking about stimulating all activities that support human abundance,
Yes.
abundance of life for the people of South Africa. Create public works projects that are funded by the people for the people. You create virtually 100% employment overnight. So you destroy the crime wave in South Africa because it's all about poverty. People are hungry, they're starving.
Yeah.
They break into cars and homes to get things, to sell them so they can earn money, so they can buy food.
Right.
Activate the farmers so they can grow GMO-free seeds to feed the people.
Yeah.
Because Monsanto is devastating South Africa. I mean, we're one of the worst countries where Monsanto is just running riot.
Really?
Oh, my latest information is they've bought up all the food storage silos in South Africa.
Sure.
It is unbelievable what's going on there.
Disgusting. Yeah.
So the Ubuntu Party's promise is completely contrary to all the other parties.
Yeah, but I want to expand a little bit, elaborate a little bit on this, because it's very clear then that monetary reform is really at the heart of your program.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is. It's all about monetary reform and making people understand some of the things we spoke about here, the origins of money, why it's so screwed up, why it's so controlled. Because only when people understand who's really behind the control of money, that they realize why we can't solve the problems we have today with the tools that created the problem.
Yeah. Well, you just mentioned interest-free, and that
Yes.
really triggers me, because that really is the core of my work, let's say. I'm really very dedicated anti-usury, and it also links back to the court case, because the problem is with banking nowadays is they create all this money out of nothing, with bookkeeping, based on our promissory note, basically, which is the contract.
Yes.
And then next you start paying off this loan, plus interest. And people, I just want to get this on camera here, because most people don't even realize what kind of huge cost this involves, because if you have a 200,000 euro mortgage, which would be fairly normal here in Holland, say, for a house, over the next 30 years you will be paying 300,000 euros in interest on top of the 200,000 principal. So what this does, this creates two major problems. In the first place, what are we paying the usury for?
Yeah.
Because most people think if we go to a bank, I borrow from a depositor, somebody who's been saving money there.
Yeah.
But this obviously is not the case,
No.
as we know nowadays, and which is openly admitted by even recently the Bank of England, but also major economists are now on record admitting this is the case. It's not speculation or conspiracy theory. This is a so-called reality staring us in the face. So we're paying 300,000 euros for basically pushing a few computer buttons.
That's it. Well, incidentally, what you said there is exactly what the advocates of the bank admitted in my court case. They admitted that they created the money out of thin air,
Yeah.
that they didn't have the money when they loaned it to me. So even in the contract, there's deception, because they're claiming they loaned me something,
Yes.
and now they say, well, we didn't actually have it when we
Yeah.
drew the contract up.
Exactly.
So contract law should prevent a bank from even entering into such a contract
Yeah.
So even the own laws that govern their criminal activity, the laws should actually prevent them from doing
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But they're so blatant and arrogant now, and the judges are paid so well by these bankers
Yeah.
that they just completely ignore those arguments.
Well, I think that's one of that's really very encouraging nowadays. That maybe even a few years ago, only a few years ago, going into a court. Well, I obviously can't really judge about the South African situation, but let's say here in Europe, going into a court and trying to tell a judge that money is being created out of nothing, etc., etc., it would have been really very complicated to even prove such a thing.
Yes.
Because the banks are so intransparent, they're so obscure in their way of working. Many bankers themselves don't know. I was talking to a Dutch banker only a few months ago with a major Dutch bank, and he was telling me that he was just waking up to fractional reserve banking, and he was telling me that his board even didn't realize that they were into fractional reserve banking. The whole system is so obscure, even to the people
Yes.
working within the system
Yeah.
itself. So,
Yeah.
but nowadays, with recently this video from the Bank of England, I don't know if you saw it, but recently the Bank of England published a short video
Oh yeah, I did see that, yes.
saying it's the loan that creates the deposit and not the other way around. Very clearly saying that the bank is actually creating money. So nowadays it's no longer an issue. You can
Yes.
just go in and say, listen, everybody knows this. We have economist A, B, and C saying this. We have the Bank of England saying this. The Federal Reserve Bank is admitting it. So, and then you can make the next step. So if we can agree that the money is being created
Out of nothing.
out of nothing, the minute we walk into the bank, can we then say that if we have to pay 300,000 in interest over the next 30 years, and for a 200,000 loan, can we then agree that there is no real, that there's nothing real that the bank gives up, there's no real service that the bank delivers, so there is no solid reason for the bank to ask this kind of money? It's basically a fraud. It's because there's a very basic legal idea that you can expect a reasonable deal, something like that is very fundamental in most law, but there is no reasonable deal.
No. There's an interesting word you just used there, fraud. Now, and this is a crime. Fraud is a huge crime, obviously, that people go to jail for life sometimes, right? Ordinary people, but not banks. And now in South Africa, the whole securitization thing is a spectacular deception, because there we have these companies called SPV, special purpose vehicles, and special purpose companies, and special purpose something else. And they buy these, it's an outright sale. It's not a cession. It's a sale from the bank to the SPV. The SPV takes complete ownership of this mortgage loan, and so the bank has no more right. They are then given some sort of right to monitor the payment, but that right should be spelled out to you, because the bank they sell the contract and the loan, but then they continue sending you invoices every month. So that's fraud.
Yeah, as if they're the owner.
Every time you get a mortgage invoice from the bank, every month when you get your slip, they're committing fraud, because they're no longer entitled to send you a bill with the bank's name saying you owe them the money, because they sold it on.
And of course, the fact that they securitize this mortgage by selling it to this special purpose vehicle without you knowing about it.
Correct.
Without you sharing in the profits.
Yes.
That's fraud also.
So all this stuff is now happening, and I've just heard from Raymond Dix, our legal advisor, before I left South Africa, that as a result of our activity, and also remember, I tried to take this to the Constitutional Court, and this is how corrupt the Constitutional Court is. They didn't even take on the hearing. They made a statement that I have no prospect of success. I mean, it was just spectacular.
Yeah, it is spectacular.
So now we know. But I also point out in my book, Ubuntu Contributionism, I point out that the Constitutional Court is a scam, because it says the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. Now, if you know what I'm saying here, you'll know that what I'm referring to is the Republic of South Africa is a corporation, and therefore when it says the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, it says clearly it's the Constitution of a corporation called the Republic of South Africa.
We're not party to the contract.
And people don't understand it. They think it's the Constitution of the land. No, wrong.
We the people as the board members of the corporation.
So the deception lies so deep, you know.
Well, so deep, but also so in your face. It's
And
just word magic, huh?
and I got sidetracked, so I forgot what I was saying. But
I'm sorry to say I did too, but but we'll just move on because there's just so much more to discuss. Because when you do Ubuntu and you have a Ubuntu party platform so much based on monetary reform, and but obviously even if you win a seat, which would be a fantastic success, that would not be enough to for an overhaul of the system.
No. But, however, we can cause a whole lot of trouble.
Of course, I was not intending to downplay it in any way, but...
and the most important thing here as well is that once you're in Parliament, you're talking from a different level of credibility.
Absolutely.
It's not just a bunch of bunny hugging, because you know how they always, the media has already tried to do that. They try to make me look like some, bunny hugging, lefty, completely dismissing any of our arguments. That's changed in the last 3 years. That's changed dramatically. Now we're running for government. Once we get a seat, everything changes even more.
Yeah, but I think all these tens of thousands of people that sign up for your in support of your activities, etc., that might also help, because it gives, of course, great credibility to your work and reaching a lot of people out there, and not just in South Africa, but all over the world nowadays. Many people have seen your videos, of course. So.
Well, hopefully what we do in South Africa now with the Ubuntu Party, running for government, that it'll give other countries, I know that the United Kingdom has got elections in 2015, I heard the other day, I hope it's accurate, that we set up Ubuntu parties in as many countries as we possibly can, and then use the experience we've gained here and the credibility, and show people that it can be done, that's assuming we're going to get in, that other countries can then also start Ubuntu party and get 1 or 2 seats in Parliament. Before you know, we've got an Ubuntu party with the same global universal consciousness, promoting true human values and sovereignty of the living, breathing human beings in every country of the world, creating a trans-border, trans-Illuminati, trans-New World Order global movement of consciousness that starts to shake the entire tree.
Sure, and there are many initiatives all over the world. Also here in Holland you have several political parties based on very similar thinking as to what you have been talking about, and it's happening everywhere, and people are waking up and they are creating these platforms, and if one gets through, maybe Ubuntu hopefully in South Africa, then this is a major inspiration to all these people, of course. So I'm very much of the idea of let the thousand flowers bloom. Everybody is just working from his own energy with other people, and slowly but surely what you clearly can see is that there are very many common strands. We all start to realize it's about the money. We all know that there are energetic, free energy possibilities, natural healing, food, a certain spirituality, etc. These are the common basic strands of all these movements. And well, Michael, we're just talking about the plans for Ubuntu, etc., but that is all on a national level and probably beyond the horizon for the time being now, that real monetary reform can be done on that level, but obviously we're not just waiting until that is going to come around. We're doing it right now. Yeah,
well, I wanted to ask you, I've heard about your alternative currency here in Holland, and I'm really excited to learn about that, because it's not easy, and I think I'd like to draw a distinction between what you mentioned earlier to me is a difference between issuing an alternative currency and calling it the legal tender of a country, because if you try and replace the legal tender, that's fraud.
Yeah.
You go to jail for life, or some countries will hang you for that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So I think it's important to draw the distinction between proposing and presenting an alternative currency, and to what extent you then have to go to make that the legal tender.
Yeah. The question arose: is it illegal to make a new currency, to create alternative currencies? And basically, it's not. Obviously, the laws are not the same everywhere, all over the world. But my experience is that they are pretty similar, at least between the United States and Europe. And I think the former dominions also, South Africa and the other white former colonies of the British Empire. But there are a few things that you need to keep in mind. The one key issue is that it must never resemble the national unit. For instance, if we have the euro, so you can't create a currency that will have a very similar name, or bills that look very similarly. Yes. For instance, in the United States there was a guy, Bernard von Nothausen. He created the Liberty Dollar, a gold-based unit, which I'm very much against. But This is what he did. Then he got arrested. They impounded for millions worth of gold, actually tons of gold that he had coined in mints. The FBI just took it and he's still trying to get it back. But they tossed him into jail and brought him before a court, which declared him guilty.
Wow.
He's now on the streets, and it doesn't look like he will be serving much time. But they were sending him a big message, and not only him, but everybody. But it was not because he created a unit; it was because it was called a dollar. So it creates this problematic.
Yeah.
You must make very sure that nobody can mistake your unit for the national currency.
Okay.
That's a key.
So let's use your example, because now I've heard a lot about, or I heard a little bit about what you've done here in Holland with an alternative currency, and I'm really excited to learn a lot more about that, to see how we could possibly implement something like that in South Africa, issuing an alternative currency for the people, by the people, without actually calling it what we shouldn't be calling it, but by choice of the people, making it become the currency of choice. And you know, once the people have spoken, it's going to be very difficult to make them stop using something if it permeates the fabric of society.
Absolutely, and creating alternative currencies also is a great communication. It just says, look, we can create new money. We can create money with different rules. It doesn't have to favor the rich. It can also favor the many. We can create monetary systems that are very different from what we have today, and this sets people thinking, because normally speaking people think, well, we have money and this is either euro or rand or dollar, wherever you are. You just think, okay, dollar is money and the rest is not, and this is how we think, but that is simply not true.
Of course not.
There are simply various forms of money that you can create and you can design. As a token of my appreciation of us doing this talk together today here, and I brought my own bills for you.
Oh, fantastic!
This is a full set.
Wow. Okay, so a full set of bills, and
and this is
what do you call these?
The gelre.
Gelre.
Yeah, that's the Dutch province where I live is called Gelderland.
And so you got 1, 2, 5, 10, 20, and 60. Oh, I like it. So it's a sexagesimal denomination.
Yeah, well, the 60 is a bit of a joke because it's 50 normally speaking, of course.
But that's what I mean, because you know, 50 is not necessarily a sacred geometric number.
True.
So I think the money, if we're going to use any kind of token of exchange to represent something, maybe we should follow the laws of nature and keep it as such. So So 60, I like 60.
Yeah. It was intended as a little joke, but for instance, a friend of mine wants to create bills 137.
Right.
I don't know why he has got that sequence in mind, but obviously you can use sacred geometric motives in there, absolutely.
So now how would you use these bills, and how have you introduced this into society here, into your community, and who uses it, and how do they use it?
Okay.
And why does it have value?
Yeah. Well, let me give you a few hints here. 1 gelre is €1. So if this is just one euro basically, and that's the deal in transactions.
Okay.
But there's a lot to say about this. So let me see where I shall head up. But there are basically two ways that you can create alternative currencies. Two very basic monetary architectures. Either you go what I would call euro backing or rand backing or dollar backing. You would simply sell one of these notes in exchange for a euro, and you would give a little discount to make it attractive. So you would sell them for 95 cents, for instance, and this would give you 95 cents to back your note with. And also gives you the possibility of converting it back to euro for a rate of 95 cents. And this 95 cents creates both an incentive to buy them and start paying with them, because 1 geld is €1 in the shop. And it also creates an incentive for the storekeeper or the businessman who takes them to spend them instead of exchanging them back to euro, because that's what you want. You want your note to keep circulating within your community. And this creates euro convertibility, which is a very big thing, because if your unit is not convertible, it's going to be difficult for businesses to accept them, or more difficult. It's not yes or no, but it's more difficult for them to accept them, especially if the network is still very small, because then they would be accepting notes that they can't spend viably elsewhere in the network because of so few participants. But also in very big networks, for instance, a network like in Switzerland where you have the WEER, which has 60,000 businesses participating, turning over billions per year. What you have is that some of these businesses are so successful getting an income in WEER that they get too much of it, more than they can actually viably spend. So they have to restrict accepting it because they cannot convert to other units. So this is a great boon if you can create convertibility. However, the problem is that if you need to get 95 cents for every gelden or whatever kind of note that you're putting into circulation, you cannot print more of your money than you have euros at your disposal. And this is a big problem, because one of the key issues with money is that it's scarce. It's too scarce. There's too little money in circulation to get everything done.
Yeah.
So you import money scarcity from the euro system if you go with euro backing. Another problem is that you cannot do interest-free credit. And because you cannot lend out more than you have, and euros, these are interest-based, so you cannot go to a bank and get a few 100,000 euros, because you will be paying 5% per year for that, and then lend them out interest-free to your participants. It's impossible.
Yeah.
So, and this is the second architecture then of money. You can create money by bookkeeping, where you can have interest-free credit simply by double-entry bookkeeping, as the banks do.
Exactly.
But instead of slapping 5% interest on somebody who's got the bad luck of having a minus in front of his name, you just say, we'll do with service and handling fees that are actually cost-based to keep the operation running, and not this plunder mechanism that is now what we have with usury. So double-entry bookkeeping, debit and credit, and this automatically gives interest-free credit, but you have no euros in the bank backing your unit, so there's no convertibility.
So now you've implemented this and you're doing this here, and do you see this going on for a long time, or is this just a short little thing to show people that it's possible?
Let me link this all together. Let me tie this all together, because these are the two monetary architectures: euro backing or interest-free credit-based. And what is so special about the gelden is that it's the first unit in the world that is interest-free credit-based, and it's still convertible to euro.
Oh, now how did you manage that?
By creating an online bourse, a sort of exchange, where people can sell their excessive gelden for a maximum of 95 cents. So if you have a business, you have some turnover, maybe 5,000 gelden, you want to spend 2,500 in the network, and the other 2,500 you can simply sell on the exchange, and because every gelden is worth €1 in the shop, so if you sell them for 90 cents, for instance, or 93 cents, then the discount is already 7 to 10%, and this creates structural demand for your unit.
Okay.
And this is what creates this convertibility.
Very interesting. Yeah.
And this has been the result of when I started out in this business quite a while ago. By now, my question was, if interest-free money is so good, why is it not the norm?
Yeah.
And of course, we can say it's the money power that is restricting monetary alternatives, etc., etc. But it's also because we simply do not have the architectures yet to create this full-blown currency that can actually really compete with the banking units.
That's very interesting. I really like that, Anthony. It's a very interesting alternative that can be implemented very quickly. Because you've now already got a foundation,
yes.
You've laid the foundation here, so it could expand very quickly
what
around the world.
What I have is the unit is called the gelden, but I call my system the talent. And it's, the talent is also an old biblical.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
how many talents do you have?
Exactly. So. And we use that, people can simply use my talent system, or the talent system, because it's just open source. And obviously there are differences per country. For instance, we use a system that's called Ideal for online payments with banks. So people can buy online gelden here in Holland. You have to use the Dutch banking system to settle the account. But obviously there would be a different system in South Africa. But that could easily be implemented, and then you could use the talent system to create currencies with.
Okay, that's very interesting because we were talking. Scott Cundall and I were talking and theorizing about creating something like this, but actually creating like the people's own new promissory note. That's a standardized sort of logo and a look and feel, and then people just create their own promissory notes based on whatever they feel the value is for what they're receiving, or that somebody demands. So it becomes a bit of a negotiation, and then somebody then issues a promissory note to that value for the person for something that they received. The moment there's a real exchange of services or goods, and a promissory note is exchanged for that, then it becomes a valuable negotiable instrument.
Yes.
And can be traded by that person that then holds it for something of equal value anywhere else.
Yes.
So there's a very interesting opportunity that we can look at. Look, personally, quite frankly, I hope that it's not going to be necessary, that we can win some seats in the upcoming election in South Africa, that we can start putting pressure on the government to close down the Reserve Bank because it's a fraudulent criminal organization that's extorting the people, and do the right thing. Replace the central bank, privately owned central bank, with a central bank that's owned by the people, that issues money for the people, tax-free and interest-free, as I said, that can make everything possible. So you don't have to go and try and find these clever, ways around the system because you've got a criminal organization running your central bank. So that'll be the shortcut.
Well, look, I think that is what everybody is hoping for. But on the other hand, and I think you can also agree this with me, this is a really very powerful international global phenomenon, and they have been in this business for 6,000 years at least, and they're very well entrenched. And
which means one thing: sooner or later, it will come to an end.
Most assuredly so.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is that this is a war that they are bringing to our doorstep on every thinkable level.
Yeah.
And my idea is we have to just push back on all these levels also. So it's on a national level, political. It's mainly ultimately it's mainly about thought. If there is impaired thinking in society, then obviously you will have bad solutions.
Mm-hmm.
Our thinking is now for 99% controlled by these demigods that have been ruling us for all these centuries. But slowly but surely, the thinking in society is changing, and well, it's changing rapidly actually. But I do note that thinking about money is often the last thing that changes. But
well, I'm hoping that as people become enlightened about the origins of money, the control of money, the fact that the whole global economic and financial system is totally controlled by a small group of people, so the way we get out of that is to stop using their money, or let the people remove those from the position that allows them to keep that control. I believe that time is upon us. I do believe in prophecy, absolutely, and I guess that the fact that the Ubuntu party is in the South African election is nothing more than a miracle, which was purely divinely guided. And if people don't understand what I'm saying, you will get to a point in your life where you will understand what I'm saying.
I understand very well what you're saying, so I'm also related to hear it actually.
Yeah, so I believe that we're the people that are going to bring in the change. There are millions of people out there that are doing incredible work. You don't have to be a hero. You don't have to go out there and do amazing things for everybody to see. There are millions of people that are working quietly behind the scenes, affecting change without anybody even knowing about it. And those are the people who must continue doing what they're doing. There are a few people that have somehow landed up in the limelight and somehow attracting the attention. And those are the people that need to continue doing what they're good at. And I guess you and I are among those people. And it's our responsibility to make sure that those people that are not necessarily getting the limelight or the exposure, if you want to call it that, limelight is a very harsh word, but or at least getting other people to listen to what they have to say, There are millions of people that are doing work equally important.
Yes.
They must carry on doing that.
Yeah.
And the one message I want to send to the people that feel alone, when they become enlightened or wake up, as they call it, I'm now awake and I've woken up to the lies and deceptions. Don't feel alone. Realize that there are millions and millions of people that feel like you.
Yeah.
The only problem is that those people are often reserved and they're scared to share their knowledge and information. They often don't even talk to their family members. Stop doing that. Go out there and be brave. Be confident in your knowledge and go and tell everyone and share your knowledge and information with everyone. If they're not ready to hear it, doesn't matter. Tell them in any case.
It's so important, Michael, because one of the things that I notice is this huge disconnect between the level of awareness that is on the web and the kind of information that you find there, and the Stone Age kind of information that you still get from the mainstream media. And if you look at the numbers of people that are on the web and are discussing very vital and serious issues on a huge level, and then you see the
Stone Age news reporting.
Yeah, it's just the disconnect is so it's unsustainable. It's annoying.
Yes.
And what we do need is exactly what you say. It's just people think, oh, I'm the only one that has awakened, and et cetera, and they will still say things like, well, people will never wake up, blah blah blah. It's untrue. People are not talking amongst each other. They're not sharing it. They're not showing the world how many are actually awakened.
And
so,
it's the fear factor.
Yeah.
And they're so good at promoting the fear factor that they make people fearful of speaking their thoughts and speaking their minds, because they think, oh, the others might not understand me, or they might not agree with me, or they stop that.
Yeah.
Go out there and tell people what you think. Tell them what's on your mind, and you'll be surprised how many people agree with you.
Absolutely. And even if you find somebody who is combative and resisting you, the people who are silent, they will see, hey, somebody is speaking up, and they will hear what you are saying.
Yeah.
And this is so important.
And I can say that again from very recent experience with the Ubuntu party, putting out the press releases, and quite frankly, our press releases are quite radical.
Mm-hmm.
The feedback that's coming from people from not only South Africa but all around the world is overwhelming.
Yes.
Saying like, finally, somebody is speaking their mind, saying what we're all thinking.
Yes.
And
Wonderful.
that is hugely rewarding,
Yeah, it must be, yeah, I can understand, yes. Well, let this be an invitation to everybody to speak up and share what is in his heart and his mind, and
exactly. And the one thing, and it looks like we're going to probably wind this up very soon, but I'd like to also just end with if I can, with a thought for the people listening to this, is with my passion, and that is the completion of the Ubuntu contributionism philosophy, and that is using money itself to remove money from the system.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, when people come to terms with the fact that money is a synthetically created tool of enslavement, and that money does nothing, people do everything. That people plant the seeds and grow the food and build the rockets and create the energy devices and can show infinite love and create the works of art. People do all that stuff. Money does nothing. Money is just the tool that most of the time gets in the way of people achieving...
sucking our life force and bringing it to the very top.
Yes. So as we move into this new way of thinking and realizing and recognizing the poison that money has become, hopefully people will start realizing that as we start using money to remove money from society and lose or lower our dependence on money, very quickly you realize and get to the point where you start asking the questions, well, why do we actually use it? And that's when I get very excited, because that's when my philosophy of a world completely free of any form of money, any form of barter or trade or exchange or value attached to anything becomes realistic. And I know that this is a big hurdle to cross for a lot of people. I've been at this for a long time now, and I can see how people respond when you suggest a world without money, or a world without barter or without trade, where people donate their God-given talents or their acquired skills for the greater benefit of all the people in their community. I can see how people respond, and some people are there in a second, they get it. Some people take a little while, and then they have a little moment, and some people just cannot get it.
Well, yeah, and there is also the middle way from where I'm coming at. Simply, ultimately, I completely believe that what is best for society is if people simply give what they create to the society, knowing that others do it the same way, so that we share in their creativity as much as they share in ours, and that we can, this mutuality can in this regard be understood and sensed in this way. That would be ideal. On the other hand, it is a very far cry from where we are at this point, and at this point we're all in this scarcity mindset, and this scarcity mindset is complete artificial, and it's created through the monetary system and mainly through usury on money. And first we need to get that out of the way.
Absolutely. So this is again why I tell people, tell them about the dream, tell them where we're going. Because you have to have a dream, you have to have a vision where you're going, and then start the process of getting there.
Yeah.
You know, how do you eat an elephant?
Yeah.
You know, one mouthful at a time.
Exactly. Yeah.
So this is it. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. The good news is we've already taken that first step. And if South Africa and the Ubuntu parties contesting the elections is a bit of encouragement for the people that look how much we can do in such a short space of time, I always tell people, just because it seems far away doesn't mean it's going to take us a long time to get there.
Fair enough. Yeah.
It's just a sequence of steps.
Yes.
And remember that the steps are also connected to our level of perception, understanding, and consciousness of what it is we are doing. The more steps we are into the process, the more awakened we become, the more in tune we become with the goal and where we're going, the quicker the journey becomes. So I think it's an exponential journey, this.
Well, that's exponential growth looks like this.
Yeah, exactly.
And people ask me sometimes how much worse must it get before it gets better, and I tell them it will get a lot worse because we are here. But the good news is it will get a lot worse very quickly. But it's also just a little way until we finally meet the end where we can.
And I think what can be seen, why I think you're spot on, and I believe we really are in the end times as far as the money systems and the control of the global banking bloodlines, because that's really what they are. We are in the end days of this control, because you can see it in the draconian laws that are made by governments on a daily basis to suppress human rights and uphold the rights of these criminal groups that run our countries. Claiming to be our governments and claiming to be the central banks that have some sort of authority. The laws that are imposed by our governments and our legal systems on the people to uphold this criminal activity is getting so obvious that people cannot be pushed much further. I think they've pushed people as pretty much as far as they can be pushed. So by doing that and by imposing this draconian control, they're actually starting the dissolution of their own control and their own demise. And we're right at that tipping point edge right now.
They can't control the mind anymore.
Yeah.
So the slavery must become with whips and balls again, and that's not going to work anymore.
No. So. And I'd like to just also say that the philosophy of a moneyless society and a world without money does not mean a world without order, or without control, or without laws that govern societies. In fact, it means exactly the opposite. Absolute freedom requires absolute control, but control based on natural law, human law, where people control their own environment, are in charge and in control of their own decisions that are made in their own communities on a daily basis, so that they can solve problems instantly and not have a hierarchical legal system that tells them what they can think and can't think, and prevent them from even getting justice because they don't have enough money. So a world without money creates the most ordered society where everything gets sorted for the greatest outcome of not only individuals but the community as a whole. So I call it a self-correcting system. You cannot screw it up because it always corrects itself for the best possible outcome of community and individual. And that requires total control of the people of the community to achieve this outcome. So when I talk about a world without money, where people contribute their gifts. Sometimes people get the wrong impression. Oh, well, we'll just run around and do what we want. No. Yes, you'll have that freedom, but it's within an agreed structure, how you contribute your God-given talents towards the community so that all the others can benefit from it. And it's not just an expression of your own ego that runs off at a tangent and does things that is completely tangent to the community.
We were talking about how humanity was created as a slave race, and this is so deeply ingrained in people because they really believe that they need to be pushed around, shoved around, enslaved to banks to get up in the morning and make a living. And that's what we call work. Make a living.
Exactly.
Instead of
I'm alive.
trying to express something that is of real importance to us, our love for each other, our love for beauty, our innate calling, etc., etc., and that this creative process should be the work of the future instead of slaving away for some stupid banker or.
And that's it. You hit the nerve end there. Creative process. Often one of the frequently asked questions, and I've fizzled them down to about 13 most frequently asked questions, and I like that number 13 because it's a sacred geometry number, and they are really, out of thousands, hundreds of thousands of questions I've fielded from people around the world for the last 10 years while developing this philosophy. It comes down to 13 the most frequently asked questions. Isn't that spectacular? Mm-hmm. Because all the other questions are somehow connected to these first 13. With those 13 questions, we solve all the problems within our own communities. Us, we, the people. No one else does it from outside. We solve them ourselves. It's simple, it's very obvious, and it is so exciting that when people see this, you can visibly see them get excited. Now, one of the frequently asked questions is, oh, human nature will never allow this to happen because people are greedy and people are this and people are that. And people actually presume that we know what human nature is. Coming from a completely enslaved, mind-controlled, brainwashed way of thinking, duped for 12 years of a draconian kind of education system, we come out of that thinking we know what human nature is. So I'd like to remind people that human nature is completely the opposite of what we think. The first primary objective of every living, breathing human being, from the moment they are born until it gets beaten out of them, is to create. We are creative creatures. We are, after all, the product of the great creation. All we want to do as living, breathing human beings is to create. And that is the thing that gets stopped. We get abruptly stopped and shifted direction to become these drones and marching machines, little soldiers, to promote the agenda of the bankers to become slaves in their corporations to do what? To earn money. The moment people realize that we're really creative souls, all we want to do is create and make things and do things and cook good food and build beautiful things and love other people and share things. I mean, sharing is one of the best ways to get to feel rewarded when you share things with people and you see their gratitude with what is it you shared with them. It's the best form of reward.
Yes. Yeah.
Not money.
No. Well, I think that's a wonderful way to wrap this up, Michael, for the time being anyway, because that's really what it all comes down to, and talks about who we are from the heart, and that's what our system obviously should express.
Yeah.
So,
well, I thank you for this time shared with me, and wonderful chat we had. I hope that it shed some light on this issue, diverse issue for many people around the world.
Me too, and I really enjoyed this chat myself also. So thanks a lot.
Thanks very much,
Michael.